Okay.
At the very outset, I must apologize from all of the others to so that my apologies, because the internet all over the country is affected these days, or वो बहुत slow है. So I will request everyone to keep their microphones off till they are spoken to, and ताकि वो हमारे net पे इतना ज़्यादा overload ना हो, and everybody can hear the speaker clearly. And I still can't see Dr. Ather's video here. Dr. Ather is our guest of honor, so I'll just give him another few minutes to join in. Till
Hello.
that time,
So Dr. Ather is here. I think yeah. Okay.
So my panelists, I can see some of them smiling. Dr. Adil is smiling. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining in. Assalamu alaikum. मैं formally start करूँगा after I see Dr. Ather has joined in, and till then, it's just an informal hello and welcome to all the audience. I hope it's going to be a very fascinating, one-of-a-kind session. जो हम लोगों में, even in the scientific circles, we've not had before. ये consciousness is one of those things जिसके बारे में हम लोग ना बात करते हैं, ना इसको formally or informally consider किया जाता है. So I'll be very glad. Oh, there is Dr. Ather. Assalamu alaikum, sir.
Assalamu alaikum. I was on the other computer also with the name Ather Enam, but
Ji,
then this computer was updating itself. I don't know why.
Sir.
So yes, I'm here, sir.
Sir. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So let's start formally. Welcome everyone to this fascinating and unprecedented topic of discussion that we are having today, inshallah ta'ala. And we have a rainbow of celebrities currently present who are directly or indirectly related to the subject of consciousness. And some I have literally pulled in against their will, because I considered them to be relevant and knowledgeable about this thing, and I wanted their take on what they think consciousness is. Consciousness, मैं थोड़ा सा introduce कर दूं. I believe since all the audience is from Pakistan, it wouldn't do us harm if we go bilingual. Let me introduce the subject of consciousness, जिसके बारे में आज हम discuss करना चाह रहे हैं. Consciousness is us being aware of our environments. और consciousness की बहुत सारी aspects हैं. One of the most fascinating aspects is, what is this us that is aware? What is this we that we call ourselves? So इस चीज के बारे में there are different ways to look at it. There are ways to study it from bottoms up. There are ways to study it from top down. By bottoms up, I mean by breaking it down into its individual components and studying one component bit by bit. That is what us neuroscientists do. That is what we are really familiar with. And that is what most of our clinical neuroscience has led us to give us a comprehensive understanding of what consciousness is. But there are other aspects. There are other people studying it from another aspect. That is what it means as a whole to be conscious, to be aware. और उसके अंदर सिर्फ biological neurosciences नहीं हैं. There are people studying it from all sides, right, left, and center, which includes people in computer science, people in physics, people in other humanities. And this has always been a very big philosophical question. Before any further ado, इसकी जितनी मर्जी हम complications को और इसकी intricacies को discuss करते जाएं, it is very little. I'll just begin by introducing one of one of the most prestigious people we have on board right now, Professor Ather Enam. Professor Ather, I must say, is an inspiration to me personally. And Dr. Ather I came across Dr. Ather a long time ago as one of the colleague neurosurgeons, but never did I really know him enough to know कि ये Dr. Ather हैं क्या. Dr. Ather is a neuroscientist, Dr. Ather is a neurosurgeon, and Dr. Ather is an inspiration to a lot of people. He's a board certified neurosurgeon, professor of neurosurgery.
Sir, मैं हाथ जोड़ रहा हूँ. We can move.
No. Sir, मैं इसलिए, because there are a lot of people who are not familiar from the neurosurgical background और वो उससे नहीं है. So I just wanted to let them know कि हम लोग ये जो चीज करना चाह रहे हैं इसमें, why have I chosen you as the guest of honor? Dr. Ather is not just a neurosurgeon. He's currently the chair of Department of Surgery at Aga Khan University, with specialist certifications in neurosurgery from Canada, from US, from UK, and you name it. Or Dr. Ather has fellowships of the American American College of Surgeons. He has been awarded several accolades, both in the United States and Pakistan, including the prestigious Sitara-e-Imtiaz. Dr. Enam has a strong interest in basic science research. He is the founder of, I would say, the specialty of neuroscience, the way it exists in Pakistan, because he's the first one to have actually developed neuroscience into a specialty the way it exists now. He's a life member of Sigma X Society, a scientific research honors society, as well as the founding president of the Pakistan Society of Basic and Applied Neuroscience, founding president of Pakistan Society of Neuro-Oncology, founder of Pakistan Academy of Neurological Surgery, a member of the executive committee of AANS and CNS, which are huge neurosurgical bodies. And he's the founder and on the advisory board of Science Bridge. He has been on the editorial board of a lot of journals. He is actively involved in many clinical and basic science research projects, authored more than 300 manuscripts. मेरा नहीं ख्याल सर हमारे पाकिस्तान में medical circles में there is anybody who is so prolific in publications as much as you are.
You take Bhutta and Adil Haider and अभी सलीम गिलानी 500 words.
So Dr. Ather Enam is the founder of Pakistan Society of Basic and Applied Neuroscience, and the annual neuroscience conference was his brainchild. Dr. Ather Enam single-handedly ये करते रहे हैं neuroscience conferences at Aga Khan, and it so happened कि चौथी या पांचवी conference में I happened to be there for another meeting, and I just saw the board and I just walked in, and serendipity इसी को कहते हैं, and उसके बाद जिसे कहते हैं the rest is history. So please welcome Dr. Ather. इसके साथ instead of wasting time on these preliminary introductions, मेरा ये ख्याल था कि मैं साथ साथ अपने speakers को introduce करता जाऊं as they come and speak. So we have with us a host of people जो medical and non-medical background से हैं. I think कि consciousness, human consciousness से हम शुरू करते हैं. तो human consciousness के लिए I have esteemed colleagues here, Dr. Umar Latif, who is a psychiatrist in United States, and Umar को मैं request करूँगा to open the subject of human consciousness. Just a brief introduction of Umar. Dr. Umar Latif is a fellow of American Psychiatric Association and a diplomat American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology, with triple board certification in psychiatry, geriatric psychiatry, and addiction medicine. Dr. Latif is currently the National Medical Director for Help of Heroes. It's a multidisciplinary, multi-specialty program that he founded in 2021. There are many other things that I can associate with Umar as well, but one of my most favorite is that he is an ardent fan of contemporary speculative literature, a fascination both me and him share, or he is in the process of writing a sci-fi novel himself, जिसके ऊपर बड़ी देर से काम कर रहे हैं, and I've had the privilege of getting a glimpse of a few of the things that he's writing about. So Umar, let's start with you. What, as a psychiatrist, do you see as a comprehensive, common definition of consciousness? Consciousness as we apply it to the human beings. Umar.
Thank you, Dr. Awan. So can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So so one of the things that's exciting about this kind of panel and the audience and the conference is it truly is multidisciplinary, right? So I could shed light from my point of view, my context as a psychiatrist, but there'll be a common thread that anyone in our physics colleagues, anyone in phenomenology, spirituality, all of those can kind of pick up those threads all the way to, I'm sure we can talk about photosynthesis, chlorophylls, microtubules, quantum decoherence and stuff, right? So how do you put an ocean in a teacup, right? That's the challenge for today. So I'm going to start from a psychiatric point of view. One way of defining what is to contrast what it is not, right? So in psychiatry, we're all familiar with what we call non-ordinary states of consciousness, right? So examples are hypnosis, meditation, and psychedelics. And I'll be talking some about psychedelics today because they've really pushed in the field of psychiatry a little bit more the envelope of both the neurobiology, phenomenology, and the psychology of consciousness, right? So in psychiatry, we've always known that there are altered states of consciousness. For example, if someone is experiencing psychosis or an altered sense of reality, there's almost an expansion of one's experience of thoughts, right? So there's ideas of reference, there's thought broadcasting, thought insertion, and there's almost a sense of this cosmic connectedness that in a normal brain state that we don't have, right? So what we're finding in research in psychedelics is that there's a brain state called the so in classic psychedelics, what we look at is dissociative episodes, right? So I'm dropping in the chat a book by Michael Pollan, How to Change Your Mind. So if anyone's interested in seeing where psychedelic research is, it's really a really good reference that I would recommend. Our brain has a normal default mode network, and that is when we're relaxed and we're in kind of a daydreaming set and stuff. And what psychedelics do is they disrupt that. So that organization that we have normally gets disrupted almost like to the brain of a baby, right? And one of the things that is a misconception in psychiatry and neurology is that consciousness is a factor of like a spotlight. I'm paying attention to something, right? When actually research tells us that attention is not like a spotlight, is more like dimming of other aspects of our awareness so that something that was right in front of us kind of becomes enhanced, right? So there's a lot of good research going on in dissociative states, in states of altered mental status that I think that we can learn from in psychiatry about consciousness. But psychiatry also has for a long time talked about the sense of ego and one's dissolution of one's sense of self. You know, Freud always said that ego is mutable in different stages of life and different stages of connectedness and stuff. So I think my point of view where I would like to kind of wrap this up is that don't get too enamored when we're looking at studies of consciousness into our own specialty. Learn from an interdisciplinary point of view, because that is where you will start seeing this kind of connectedness, these common threads. Don't go too micro, don't go too macro. Learn from other disciplines like we're doing today. So I don't know if that was a drop of the ocean, Dr. Awan, but from a psychiatric point of view, people who are interested in consciousness, my plug is follow the recent research in psychedelics, because that will summarize a lot of the work that pre-exists up to
Okay, that was a wonderful take on a very difficult subject, but my expectation from you would be to elaborate a little bit more on what consciousness is actually, because in a psychiatric perspective, we are talking about the abnormal states of mind. We are not talking about the normal. And what we're really interested in at the present, and the whole purpose of getting all these fabulous people together, is that we at least come to some understanding of what we call consciousness, what is being aware of things, what is being sentient. I remember when, a long, long time ago, when Matrix, the movie, was released, I received a call in the middle of the night, and I answer the phone, and it's Umar there. And he just wakes me up and says, "You have to watch this movie. This is one thing that is capable of changing the way you look at the world." And then we've had many, many more long sessions of discussion on the Matrix. So the concept the Matrix shows is that the consciousness is a total sum of all the sensory input in our experiences, but it still fails to tell us what is experiencing those things. But in any way, consciousness, according to that perspective, is a cumulative sum of all the sensory experience that we get. So is that just that what we can call consciousness? If that is just the consciousness, then maybe if we can change the sensory input like they do in the Matrix, they can create a new consciousness. So then machine consciousness and, you know, those things can be generated. What is your take on this?
Yes, I mean, I think you bring up a nuanced conversation of two separate things, right? One is the subjective sense of self-awareness, me, myself, right? So metacognition, how do I even think about my own thinking? Am I able to separate myself from my stream of consciousness and be self-aware, right? And that self-awareness kind of dissolves. But the other point that you're bringing up is, where does the seat of consciousness lie, right? So then now we're going into the objectivity of, which is a whole other discussion, right? So borrowing from the Matrix analogy, I think by the time we're done, we'll all be taking the red pill today, and we'll go down that rabbit hole. So yeah, so I think from to punt to the other panelists, kind of, what'll help us, I think, is first planting ourselves in the subjective experience of consciousness. Is how am I even self-aware of that? And that brings up, actually, in this day of AI, is sense of agency, sense of the salience network, you know, in our brain, the sense of you know, machine learning and everything else. So I think I would, from a psychiatric point of view, posit that it's as important to know the phenomenology, the subjective experience of consciousness, in addition to the objective kind of the substrate, right? The software versus the hardware kind of age-old conversation. So I think I would pivot on that then.
Okay, so with this input, it's time probably to get an opinion from those who are actually using these concepts to build on machine consciousness and machine awareness. ये आजकल का बहुत rave topic है, and ever since ChatGPT was released, there have been discussions and debates about whether it's conscious, really, does it really understand what it's saying, or it's just an automated response just because of a large database that it has. So we have two very celebrated experts right now. Dr. Adil Razi is a professor of computational neuroscience at Turner Institute of Brain and Mental Health at Monash University, with Monash Data Futures Institute in Australia. He leads a highly cross-disciplinary lab, और उनकी lab research ही इन्हीं चीजों पे कर रही है. on these machine learning approaches to answer the questions that are grounded in neurobiology. Wow, what a combination. So Dr. Adil is a graduate of NED University Karachi, MSc in Computational Engineering from the University of Technology, Germany, and his PhD is in Electrical Engineering from the University of New South Wales, Australia. He did his postdoctoral studies at Wellcome Center of Human Neuroimaging in UCL, UK. Dr. Adil, over to you, sir.
So what was the question? So you want my take from
the question, the discussion is taking its own direction towards what the conscious, how we're trying to, we can't really define consciousness in one sitting like this, but we're trying to understand what we consider to be consciousness. So usme, abhi hum jo discuss kar rahe the was that if the consciousness as we take it to be is only a cumulative sum of all the sensory input and a computational understanding of that input, can that thing be replicated in a computer?
Okay, thank you. So in mainstream consciousness, how we define this is pretty much everyone in mainstream consciousness research, they will define it in one way, which is what Umar was and you alluded to, which is about about the subjective experience of awareness and self-awareness and all. So this is how we define consciousness. So anyone is mostly based on self-reports. So people who are developing measures of how consciousness and all that, they usually are self-reports, and this is considered as a gold standard in research. So I think how we define consciousness is kind of settled. However, of course, it's an extremely broad topic, and of course the recent interest, as you were mentioning, from the chat GPT, especially from 2022 onwards. So there was a pretty large manuscript. I will drop a link to this. That came last year, I think, where there were lots of computer scientists and consciousness researchers and philosophers. They all collaborated, and they wrote a manuscript. It's about about 90 pages long, and it talks about what is the state. So they just deliberated on the question that is AI conscious as we know it. So they look at consciousness in AI or in machines from the perspective of they use a perspective which is called functional computationalism. So this is a view which they take, which is pretty mainstream as well. That so what does it mean? Computational functionalism is about that a computational is a fundamental and necessary and sufficient condition of right sorts of computation. They define consciousness. So that's how they took this. And if you take that definition and then they went through multiple different theories of consciousness. There are so many theories around, and lots of there's a theory of theory which is about the truth. Some of you probably know they talk about toothbrush theories, where everyone has, because no one wants to use anyone else's toothbrush, so everyone has a theory about so everyone wants to have their own theory because they don't like to use anyone else's theory. So there's a plethora of theories. There are some of them which are pretty as we go along during the day, we will probably touch on them. Some of them, integrated information theory, which was called pseudoscience by another group of scientists who were trying, who work on higher order theories as well. The predictive processing, free energy principle, attention and schemas, and there are many theories. So they looked at those theories and then developed a table, and they said, okay, some of the requirements are basically there in the current AI. So so based on those things, some of the comments might already be there in AI. Although I do think that, most of the people who work in consciousness, they do think that it's all nonsense. AI, computers are not, AI is not conscious, and I do agree with that. It's just there's lots of nonsense. I think probably we should not be too excited about this. And I give some anecdotes and all that on that topic as well. But from my point of view, if you want my take on machines being conscious, I don't think it is. We did talk about things becomes a bit more interesting when you combine biology and machines. So we did some work on dish brain where we cultured neurons and we put them on a silicon chip, and then we trained them to play games and all that. But it's still, we call them sentient. And I saw that. So but there's a distinction between sentience and consciousness as well. Sentience is being a very low bar, is just responsiveness to some structured stimulus, some internal processing, but that's very, very basic. It's not consciousness. So there's a lot of confusion around this topic as well. There's a whole sentient gate at that time. Lots of people thought of sentience as equal to consciousness, which isn't true. So things get interesting when you combine biology and machines. Lots of people talk about organoid intelligence and dish brains and xenobots and all those things. So there are this is what we call diverse intelligence. There's a whole banner around which we talk about those things. It's interesting. There might be some rudimentary consciousness there in those things, but the ChatGPTs, I don't think that's conscious in any way.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Adil. Here you have taken us deeper into the debate. कि consciousness की दो aspects clear हो गई हैं. One is being responsive. यानी कोई चीज, if something can respond to the external stimuli differentially, we can call it sentient, but since it's not really aware of its own response, we probably will not be able to call that thing conscious. We also have with us Dr. Aga Raza, who is a Fulbright scholar who received his PhD in computer science with specializations in language technologies from Carnegie Mellon University, Pittsburgh. And Dr. Aga Raza, I've heard him speak on computer sentience, और यही chat GPT का जब बड़ा रौला पड़ा था, तो Dr. Aga साहब ने हमें enlighten किया था about what computer sentience is and what computer consciousness is. A little bit about Aga Saab. He has 19 years of experience in teaching and research, spanning organizations like FAST, Lahore Information Technology, Punjab, LUMS, and other institutions. His research focuses on speech and natural language processing, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. Wow, what disciplines, sir. You just heard what Dr. Adil said about machines not being conscious at all, and that's he ascribes it the common impression of being nonsense. So आपके ख्याल में हमें computers के अंदर sentience और consciousness को simulate करने में क्या रुकावट है? What do you see as the hindrance in computers, the way they are growing? Moore's law हम सबको पता है कि वो multiply कर रहा है, उसकी power processing multiply कर रही है. And what do you see as stopping a computer from being sentient in the future?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Can you all hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you so much for inviting me to this esteemed panel, and I'm really looking forward and also really enjoying the discussion and learning a lot from my esteemed colleagues. So within the computer science world, within the people who do machine learning and AI for a living, there is a big debate around this topic. And I would like to broaden this debate. I don't think that there are many proponents of the point that ChatGPT is conscious right now, or any AI is conscious right now. I don't think that that camp has a lot of followers. But the question about whether AI, whether a machine can become conscious, that I think is a bigger question, and that is the one on which there is a debate. So people on one side of the debate who believe that machines can become conscious, they believe, so their point is that your human brain is essentially a computer, and it just has a different basis. It's made out of neurons, physical neurons, biological processes. That's how we think. That's how it processes. Similarly, you have a digital computer. You have the Turing machine that it's actually implementing. You have your artificial neural network. Anything which is computationally possible, if consciousness is somewhere in there, then at some point it could be replicated in the digital domain as well. That's the point of view of the people who believe that machines can become conscious. To this, people like Roger Penrose, they believe that computers cannot become conscious because he has this, and again, it is a line of speculation. So it begins by defining understanding as something which is non-computable in the Turing sense. So understanding is just like your halting problem. It is not something that a Turing machine can solve. So if understanding is defined like that, he looks for something in the computational sense which belongs to that camp. And he goes to quantum computing, because quantum computing, with the entanglement, with the superposition, it is not something which is computable in the Turing sense. So that leads to a point, and again, many speculations down the line, it reaches a point where it says a traditional computer, an AI agent, or an AI machine, for example, a neuron could be cloned, could be copied, so I can make a copy of the entire neural network at any point. Exactly. I can rewind it, I can forward it, I can do all of those things with it. We have not been able to do that with the human brain yet. We don't have a way of copying it, forwarding it, rewinding it. And the way he defines it, he says that if it is a quantum computer, and he also tries to find the seed of that quantum computation in the microtubules. So, but yeah, if it's a quantum computer, then we cannot replicate it, because replicating it requires observing it, which means destroying the state. So that means that it can never be done. But again, this is a line of speculation, and most of those things are still speculation. So my stance on this would be, and I'll end with adding one last point here. We should also be cognizant of something that we have seen happen multiple times in the domain of AI and machine learning, is that sometimes we confound the destiny with the pathway. There is a way we humans are conscious, and we know about that. And if we say that machines are not able to replicate this way of becoming conscious, that does not mean that we have now proven that the machines cannot become conscious using a different way. When we were following this approach, at one time we used to believe that machines cannot listen and understand conversations or produce speech because they cannot do it like humans, because human articulatory system is very complicated. And machines overcame that using a way, okay, we can speak, but not like humans. We can speak really well, but we just are not using the same mechanisms as humans. So what if machines can become conscious using a different approach, even if this non-computability of the brain is proven?
So fascinating. You have actually taken the discussion into a philosophical debate, and we have a wonderful consciousness philosopher here on board with us. But before I take the conversation to him, there are a few things I wanted to ask you. जिस तरह आपने कहा कि रॉजर पेनरोज ने microtubules की theory पेश की थी, and that the seed of consciousness is not in the neurons or the neural networks, it's in the microtubular organelles within the neurons themselves. इसी तरह, there was another, the co-author of this theory is Stuart Hameroff. Hameroff is an anesthesiologist, or he probably, of all the people involved in consciousness, including neuroscientists, probably I would expect an anesthesiologist to have some idea of what consciousness is so that he can turn it off. Do you get it? Because they do it. My apologies, G. Because they do it on a day in, day out basis for their for a living. So we have a very senior anesthesiologist with us, Dr. Arshad Taqi. He's one of my teachers, one of my senior colleagues. And let me introduce Dr. Arshad to you. Dr. Arshad Sahab is a graduate of Allama Iqbal Medical College and a fellow of College of Physician Surgeons, joined one of the most celebrated anesthesia teams in the country called Associates in 2001 as a full-time consultant. And he's an examiner and a supervisor and a paper setter for FCPS anesthesiology, nominated as a member of the faculty of the FCPS anesthesiology team. And he has had the honor of introducing basic assessment and support in intensive care. Dr. Taqi Sahab has been ever since involved with intensive care and training of doctors in intensive care management, where they encounter unconscious people day in, day out, maintain their vital functions and try to wake them up back into consciousness. So, Dr. Arshad Saab ke paas, I'll direct the discussion to Dr. Arshad Saab ke sir. What is it that you turn off when you think ke hum patient ko anesthesia de rahe hain? I understand there are components of anesthesia, paralysis, sedation, and everything, whatnot. But what is that consciousness that goes away when a patient is unconscious?
Thank you, Ji. Thank you very much for inviting me to this panel, and it's been enlightening. Actually, as a matter of fact, your invitation to the group and admitting me in that group actually made me seriously think about consciousness. Because when we joined anesthesia, this was just taken for granted. There was that group of drugs you gave them, the patients turned unconscious. At some point, when you started reading about them, you read about theories of mechanism of action of anesthetic agents, all Greek to us, still Greek to us. And mostly, like when we're talking to our patients and they say, are you going to put me to sleep? And we realized, and at some point I realized that consciousness, this anesthesia was not sleep. When you're sleeping, you're dreaming. When you wake up, you at times have some recollection of what was going through. You wake up refreshed. When we anesthetize a patient, when they wake up, or even when I've talked to people who have been in critical care, on ventilators, at times we give them sedation, at times we actually withhold sedation. But when they wake up and finally recover and you go back and ask them, it's mostly a big void. They don't recall anything. They don't remember anything. So even during anesthesia, they don't remember anything. What really fascinates me is when patients wake up from their sleep and we say they have regained consciousness. And then they're talking to you, and when you go back and question them the next day, their first recollection of actually waking up from that sleep is sometimes hours after they actually were conversing with you and making fairly intelligent speech. They don't have any recall of that event. And initially we attributed that to benzodiazepines because they have that property of amnesia. But then that I've seen happen in patients who have not received benzodiazepines. So that makes me wonder, at what point were they really conscious? I mean, what's that period when they were talking to you and making a fairly intelligent conversation, but had absolutely no recall of that? I don't know how I would explain that. I think the neurologist would be in a better position to explain that. But it is fascinating that a very diverse group of drugs acting at different levels in the brain produce that same endpoint, that is lack of consciousness. So, I mean, that's my understanding of consciousness.
Sorry to interrupt you, sir. So, आपके कहने का मतलब ये है that there is no one single mechanism that we knock out, which we can consider to be effective to put a person to sleep, or
I mean,
as you...
yes. I mean, different anesthetics act at different levels in the brain. There are different theories. They have kind of different mechanism of actions. Like volatile anesthetic agents do not work the way the propofol works. But you get the same endpoint, that's loss of consciousness. So that's fascinating.
So we must all be heading towards that Tononi's theory of integrated information, जो brain की whole networking को, integration को ascribe करता है with consciousness.
I mean, at least that's the way. That's something that anesthetics seem to interrupt, I suppose.
बिल्कुल सही. Now is the time, ये चूंकि अब इतनी philosophical हो गई है बात के मैं डॉक्टर हुसैनी को involve करना चाह रहा हूँ. Dr. Habibullah Hussaini is one of the neurophilosophers, I must say, on the panel. Dr. Hussaini is a non-practicing physician with a PhD in bioethics and health humanities. He is a clinical bioethicist and ethics fellow at Center of Bioethics and Medical Humanities at Ohio State University. The title of his PhD dissertation was Neurobiology of Human Agency, Neurophilosophy, and Neurolaw. Could neuroscience become a coercive force in the future? His main interests are in exploring the mysteries and origins of consciousness, its role in maintaining and sustaining human self, and how it is necessary as a phenomena in producing free will. Dr. Hussaini, ये आपने हम सारे साइंसदानों से तो अभी तक बात सुन ली है. What do you take from this? And I want you to add your own take on the whole discussion that we have had so far. Dr. Hussaini.
Thank you very much. So what we know from the general discussion is that there is no agreed upon definition of consciousness, but there is an approximate agreement. So we become conscious when we wake from a deep and dreamless sleep. It has to be dreamless. Or you could substitute it with deep anesthesia, because sleep can have a component of consciousness because people dream. The unique thing about consciousness is that it is the only thing in the known universe that is immune to error. Even if the contents of consciousness are all fake, just like in the Matrix, your consciousness is the only thing that is real. It's the same thing that Descartes said, even though he had his own reasons. But contents of consciousness can be fake. It could be simulation, it could be hallucinations, it could be anything, but your experience is real. Now, you mentioned Tononi's integrated information theory. The problem with that theory is that, and it was pointed out in 1890 by William James, it's the same problem that panpsychism has. It's called the subject summation problem. If a lot of information contained in different pathways is integrating, how does it produce, or how does consciousness emerge from it? Because phenomena emerge all the time. We see it around us. For example, water is wet, water is liquid, but individual water molecules are neither wet nor liquid. But we can explain that water molecules at a certain temperature and at a certain pressure slide over or glide over each other, that it produces the phenomena of wetness. With neuronal activity, we can't explain how it produces consciousness, and that is a big mystery. Some call it the hard problem of consciousness. There is a school, I don't I'm sympathetic towards it. I kind of subscribe to it, even though I don't identify with it as a matter of identity. They're called the new Mysterians. And Noam Chomsky, he's had a stroke recently, Colin McGinn, Thomas Nagel, they are new Mysterians. What they say is that when the problem of consciousness is discussed, there are basically two different domains. One is what we call problems. Problems can be hard or easy. Easy problems have mostly been solved. There are hard problems that are difficult to solve. But then there are mysteries, and at least Chomsky and Nagel believe that mysteries can never be solved because we don't possess the right neuroarchitecture.
Tools to solve it.
Exactly. So maybe consciousness is one of those mysteries. We can look towards the works of Christoph Koch at the Allen Institute in Seattle. Now, he's a neuroscientist. He's a weird person, to say the least. But he believes that it is in the inner connectedness of the brain that consciousness resides. However, in my discussions with him, he too believes that if we were to replicate the connectome, the entire brain, atom to atom, in a semiconductor structure, it would not be conscious. However, he says another thing. He says, and I agree with him, we are not certain that any other person is conscious. So you sitting in front of me have all the information that you need to pretend to be conscious. But unless my brain is physically connected to your brain, I cannot experience your consciousness. I can believe that you're conscious, but there's no way for me to know that you're conscious. And this goes to the Chinese room experiment that Searle argued about.
Yes.
And we are getting there, but I personally believe that ChatGPT is not conscious. And I think machines can never be conscious. And the reason for that is that machines follow an algorithm. Now, if we were to design a machine that would write its own algorithm, even that algorithm will be based on a primary algorithm. And we don't know how to write an algorithm to be conscious. We can write an algorithm that can create make-believe consciousness. It'll still be fake. So this is where the problem lies. And I think maybe 300 years before Christ, we had these theories, and they haven't changed much. We're still here.
Okay, so according to you, इसमें 3-4 आपने बड़ी खूबसूरत twists डाली हैं. Number one, if an algorithm is based on an existing algorithm, and my apologies, if an algorithm is based on an existing algorithm, it's all deterministic. And according to you, it can never be conscious. So, इससे तो हमारे जितने neuroscientists हैं who are trying to understand the connectedness of the brain and neuronal connectome in order to try to understand where the consciousness resides, that their efforts become futile. क्योंकि एक अगर physical entity से consciousness spontaneously arise नहीं कर सकती, तो then all the efforts are futile. Then that means you need some kind of a divine intervention or something that we are not able to understand yet. ये Roger Penrose का भी यही premise है कि we don't have the proper tools to understand that kind of, our science is not geared up enough to understand things like consciousness. Very interestingly, you mentioned David Chalmers, जिसने hard problem and easy problem में divide किया है study of consciousness को. For my audience, I'll just briefly let you know what the hard problem is and what the easy problem is. The easy problem is to try to figure out how the neuronal circuits and the physical mechanisms, what mechanisms are involved in this state that we call consciousness. अब जितनी मर्जी ये मुश्किल हो, Chalmers says it is still an easy problem compared to the hard problem of the fact that we don't even understand that state per se. So what that state is, how do you define consciousness, is the hard problem. David Chalmers ka he said earlier, ek hypothesis hai, he says all matter is conscious, और उस matter की consciousness को उसने units में define किया हुआ है as phi. Something is high phi and something is high. Phi is the वो जो letter phi है. और according to that, if the non-physical things have a low phi, but they still have some level of consciousness, फिर तो हमारे materialists जितने हैं, they can figure out a way of determining the phi of the non-biological things and maybe replicate biological consciousness in them. What do you say to that?
So what Chalmers says is basically based on what Spinoza and Leibniz said, that the world is full of these monads or primary particles of some sort that are mysterious and have consciousness. So panpsychism was traditionally a religious theory. Hindus have it, some Muslims have it, Jews have it, Christians have it. But modern panpsychism is not religious. Christoph Koch is a panpsychist. Chalmers is a hard panpsychist, even though he's an atheist. And I mean, he's pretty open about it, even though he lives in Indiana, which is a very religious state. The problem is what William James pointed out, that if all particles, or at least some particle, let's say all carbon atoms, we are all carbon-based life form, if all of them have some sort of primordial consciousness, how does it sum up? What are the mechanisms? Now, this could be an easy problem. It might not be a hard problem, but we will have to accept panpsychism as a theory first, and then build from there. Right now, orthodox science does not accept panpsychism. All emergentism believers are anti-panpsychist. So for example, Daniel Dennett, Sam Harris, all of them reject panpsychism. They believe in what is called brute emergence. The best criticism of brute emergence comes from Galen Strawson, who's at University of Texas at Austin. He's British. His father was Peter Strawson, another eminent philosopher. And basically, he says that brute emergence is impossible. That's what Christoph Koch also says, that let's say if phenomena Y emergent from substrate X, something in Y has to be wholly and totally dependent upon properties in X. But if there is no property of consciousness in X, it can't exist in Y. So that is how they became panpsychists. But again, how do we solve the subject summation problem? How do these little billions and trillions of little conscious entities combine? We have to find out. Maybe Dr. Enam would know about it.
Sir, Dr. Enam को मैं in the end इस सारी diverse चीज को conclude करने के लिए कहूँगा. अभी आपकी बातों से this leads us to the hardcore people present in the panel, the physicists. Alhamdulillah, we have two very bright minds. One is a celebrated physicist, a very good friend of mine. Alhamdulillah, I take pride in calling myself Dr. Sabi's friend. And another fact that I associate his late father as one of my mentors and one of my teachers. So Dr. Sabi Saab is a professor of physics at LUMS. और ये जो आपकी Dr. Hussaini, आपकी जो discussion है about non-biological entities having aspects of consciousness, जो भी आपने कहा, Chalmers जिसको subscribe करता है, ये बहुत हद तक, as far as I have read, I'm not familiar with these things too much, लेकिन चूंकि मैं fascinated हूँ, I keep reading about this. इसमें quantum mechanisms, quantum phenomena आजकल बहुत ज्यादा यूज किए जा रहे हैं to explain complex things and the connection between complex things like consciousness. So I will now direct the discussion towards Sabi Saab. Dr. Sabi is a physicist with a passion for science, and his passion is absolutely unmatched, I tell you. I have always called myself passionate about science, लेकिन मैंने Sabi Saab की passion जैसा बंदा नहीं देखा. He's a professor of physics, Ahmed Daud Chair at LUMS, Syed Babar Ali School of Science and Engineering. He helped establish the physics department of LUMS and was among the principal founders of the school's experimental facilities and curriculum. This has been replicated everywhere else in Pakistan. He has played an important part in introducing innovative learning tools, mostly revolving around insightful homegrown physics experiments. And Dr. Sabi actually develops tools to teach teachers to make practical experiments in their lab. Sabi's research interests encompass spintronics, magnetism, and optics. Dr. Sabi has published around 80 research papers in international journals, including Science, Physical Review, Optics Express, Journal of American Chemical Society, Proceedings of the National Academy of Science, etc., etc. He's the director of the upcoming National Center of Nanoscience and Nanotechnology. Or Sabi Saab is the general secretary of a wonderful grassroots level organization called Khwarizmi Science Society. Khwarizmi Science Society has been instrumental in bringing back science into our schools, into our curriculums, and into the domain, accessible domain of young students. और उनको fascinate करने में with the science the way we are fascinated. Khwarizmi Science Society का बहुत बड़ा role है. Lahore Science Mela, curated by Dr. Sabi, has attracted more than 50,000 visitors over a span of 6 days in the last Science Mela that took place. Prior to joining LUMS in SSC, Dr. Sabi was postdoc in chemistry and material science at the University of California, Berkeley, and a PhD student as a Rhodes Scholar at the Oxford University. Dr. Sabi is a recipient of multiple awards, including TWAS Medal in Physics for Pakistan in 2008 and National Innovation Prize in 2015. He is a member of the Task Force on Culture for Science in the Muslim World, National Committee on R&D constituted by the Higher Education Commission, and serves on the advisory board as a member for some Pakistani universities. Dr. Sabi, ये वो चीजें हैं जो आपसे मैं हर दफा पूछने की कोशिश करता हूँ, and I somehow fail to get a satisfactory and comprehensive answer क्योंकि हमारे पास इस तरह time overlap नहीं होता. आज आप फंस गए. So now you will have to elaborate on this कि हमें quantum phenomena को किस तरह correlate करके consciousness को understand करने में help. Dr. Sabi, sir.
बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम. अस्सलाम वालेकुम. आपने बहुत लंबी तमहीद कर दी डॉक्टर साहब, तो जो असल में किस्सा है वो तो बहुत छोटा सा है.
Well deserved तमहीद है सर.
अच्छा, दरअसल ये जो आज ये जो महफिल सजी है इसमें न्यूरो साइंस के मुख्तलिफ पहलुओं पे बात हुई और अभी तक एक मेरे लिए बड़ा लर्निंग एक्सपीरियंस है कि अभी तक हम कॉन्शियसनेस को पूरी तरह ना तो वो हमारी गिरफ्त में आई ना हम उसे पूरी तरह समझ सके. तो जो और मुझे तो मिर्जा गालिब पे ये शेर याद आ रहा है कि है गैब गैब जिसको समझते हैं हम शहूद, है गैब गैब जिसको समझते हैं हम शहूद, है ख्वाब में हनूज जो जागे हैं ख्वाब में.
क्या बात
कि हम असल में गैब को शहूद बनाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं. ये कॉन्शियसनेस जो एक सिमेंटिक्स में हम उलझे हुए हैं कि ये क्या है, इसकी माहियत क्या है, हैसियत क्या है, सेल्फ अवेयरनेस किस चीज़ का नाम है, और एनेस्थीसिया क्या है, कौन सी उसके अंदर कुव्वत आपकी सल्ब हो जाती है जो फिर दोबारा ज़हूर पजीर हो जाती है जब एनेस्थीसिया से आप निकलते हैं. तो ये सारी चीज़ें बता रही हैं कि कॉन्शियसनेस खुद एक बड़ी एक फ्लूइड सी चीज़ है, एक अभी तक पूरी तरह हमारे गिरफ्त में नहीं आई. हो सकता है उसकी डेफिनेशन करना ही मुमकिन ना हो, जब मैं ऑक्सफोर्ड में था तो एंटोन ज़ाइलिंगर जो अब एक नोबेल लॉरिएट है, क्वांटम एंटेंगलमेंट पे काम करता है, उसकी एक टॉक थी इंटेंगलमेंट और क्वांटम मैकेनिक्स पे। उससे किसी ने सवाल पूछा कि इज क्वांटम फिजिक्स रिलेटेड टू कॉन्शियसनेस। उसने उसका बड़ा खूबसूरत उस मौके पे जवाब दिया। उसने कहा पीपल डोंट अंडरस्टैंड कॉन्शियसनेस एंड दे डोंट अंडरस्टैंड क्वांटम मैकेनिक्स, सो दे थिंक दे मस्ट बी इंटररिलेटेड। तो मेरे ख्याल में अभी भी कैफियत कुछ ऐसी ही है। एक नया फील्ड ज़हूर पज़ीर हुआ तकरीबन 20 साल पहले, जिसे हम क्वांटम बायोलॉजी कहते हैं। क्वांटम बायोलॉजी की ये कोशिश थी कि जो बायोलॉजिकल फिनोमिनन हैं उनको आप एक्सप्लेन करें क्वांटम मैकेनिक्स के जरिए। और जो एक फिजिसिस्ट होता है वो कोशिश करता है कि वो एक्सपेरिमेंट्स करे, वो एक्सपेरिमेंट्स रिपीटेबल हों, रिप्रोड्यूसिबल हों, उनकी एक एनालिटिकल एक्सप्लेनेशन मौजूद हो जो इंटरप्रिटेशन से मावरा हो, जिसमें इंटरप्रिटेशन का बहुत ज़्यादा रोल ना हो, ताकि वो फलसफे की डोमेन से बाहर रहे चीज़। अच्छा, तो जब क्वांटम बायोलॉजी आई तो ऐसे फिनोमिनन की तलाश शुरू हुई कि कौन से ऐसे फिनोमिना हैं जो क्वांटम मैकेनिकली एक्सप्लेन किए जा सके। और 5-6 फिनोमिनन साइंटिस्ट को मिल गए जिनके अंदर एक प्यूरिटानिस्टिक अंदाज से क्वांटम मैकेनिकल एक्सप्लेनेशन बड़ी खूबसूरत जानदार मौजूद है, जो एक फिजिसिस्ट को समझ आएगी, जो एक फिजिसिस्ट जिसपे उसका दिली इत्मीनान होगा, जो फिजिक्स के जो मुरवजा असूल हैं उस पर पूरी उतरती है। मिसाल के तौर पर एक क्वांटम बायोलॉजी का एक फिनोमिनन है माइग्रेटरी बर्ड्स का, कि जो मुख्तलिफ परिंदे हैं वो कैसे साइबेरिया से उठते हैं और सिंध की झीलों में आके, अफ्रीका की झीलों में आके वो अपना रास्ता तलाश करते हैं और आके बैठ जाते हैं, और फिर उनकी अगली नस्ल, नेक्स्ट प्रोजेनी, वो वापस उसी रास्ते को रिट्रेस करते हुए अपने ओरिजिन तक पहुंच जाती है। तो ये क्वांटम बायोलॉजिकल फिनोमिनन है क्या? दरअसल आंख के अंदर मॉलिक्यूल्स हैं, मॉलिक्यूल के अंदर लोन पेयर्स ऑफ इलेक्ट्रॉन्स हैं। लोन पेयर ऑफ इलेक्ट्रॉन्स, हर इलेक्ट्रॉन की एक स्पिन होती है, वो एक छोटा सा मैग्नेट होता है, और अर्थ की एक मैग्नेटिक फील्ड है। जब आप एक मैग्नेट को मैग्नेटिक फील्ड में रखें वो प्रोसेस करता है, हमारे रेडियोलॉजिस्ट जानते हैं, इसे एमआरआई कहते हैं। तो हर उस परिंदे की आंख में एक छोटा सा एमआरआई एक्सपेरिमेंट होता है। तो एमआरआई एक्सपेरिमेंट जब होता है तो वो स्पिन प्रोसेस करती है। स्पिन्स की 2 किस्में होती हैं। जब आप 2 इलेक्ट्रॉन्स आपस में स्पिन करते हैं तो उसे इंटेंगल्ड पेयर कहते हैं। तो उन 2 इलेक्ट्रॉन्स की पेयर की 2 किस्में होती है, एक सिंगलेट स्टेट, एक ट्रिपलेट स्टेट। तो जब सिंगलेट और ट्रिपलेट पॉपुलेशंस बनती हैं तो वो मुख्तलिफ लेवल्स ऑफ डार्कनेस और ब्राइटनेस रेटिना के मॉलिक्यूल्स पे इम्पिंज करती हैं, और उस ब्राइटनेस और इंटेंसिटी के पैटर्न को देखते हुए परिंदा अंदाजा लगाता है कि वो किस डायरेक्शन में मूव कर रहा है। यानी छोटा सा क्वांटम मैकेनिकल एक्सपेरिमेंट हो रहा है, एमआरआई एक्सपेरिमेंट हो रहा है उसकी आंख में। तो ये एक बड़ी जानदार, वाजे, एनालिटिकल डिस्क्रिप्शन है जिसको टेबल टॉप पर और लेबोरेटरी के अंदर आप रेप्लिकेट कर सकते हैं, क्योंकि ये मॉलिक्यूल्स बनाए जा सकते हैं, एक्सट्रैक्ट किए जा सकते हैं, उनको मैग्नेटिक फील्ड में रख सकते हैं और उनकी प्रॉपर्टी स्टडी की जा सकती है। एनएमआर स्पेक्ट्रोस्कोपी का एक्सपेरिमेंट किया जा सकता है। तो ये वैलिड एक फिजिकल एक्सप्लेनेशन है क्वांटम बायोलॉजिकल फिनोमिनन की। एक और मिसाल उसकी है स्निफिंग। अब सूंघते कैसे हैं कि अगर आप, ये जाहिर है एक रूडिमेंट्री लेवल की कॉन्शियसनेस भी से आप कह सकते हैं, एक क्योंकि जो आपका डेफिनेशन थी एक कॉन्शियसनेस की कि आप के अंदर एक्चुएशन होनी चाहिए कि आप किसी स्टिमुलस को रिस्पॉन्ड करें, तो स्निफिंग या सूंघना भी एक, जो जिसे कुव्वत शामा कहते हैं, वो भी एक अमल है।
even अगर आप रिस्पॉन्ड ना भी करें, just the awareness that you're smelling something is consciousness. सही है सर, प्लीज।
तो अब मुख्तलिफ जो सेंट और फ्रेग्रेंस के मॉलिक्यूल्स हैं, हर एक की एक एनर्जी लेवल्स हैं, उसकी वाइब्रेशनल एनर्जी लेवल्स हैं। फॉर एग्जांपल, तो आपने नाम सुना होगा रामन स्पेक्ट्रोस्कोपी का, जो इन वाइब्रेशनल एनर्जी लेवल्स को स्टडी करता है। तो अब आपके एक क्वांटम टनलिंग का एक फिनोमिनन है जो आपके, जाहिर है स्निफिंग के लिए भी ऑल्फैक्टरी मॉलिक्यूल्स आपके नाक में मौजूद हैं, तो वो कुछ वाइब्रेशनल लेवल्स को आगे गुजरने देते हैं, एक वैल्व का काम देते हैं, और आगे मजीद मॉलिक्यूल्स, जी प्रोटीन्स हैं, और वो आगे ट्रिगर होती हैं। तो एक सॉलिड एक डिस्क्रिप्शन है स्निफिंग की, फोनॉन असिस्टेड टनलिंग। is the reason why we have sniffing and why we have this extreme specificity of different fragrances. We can differentiate between thousands of different kinds of fragrant molecules, even with a very small number of kinds of G proteins that exist. तीसरा एक phenomenon था जो हमारी food security के लिए बड़ा अहम है, वो है photosynthesis. Photosynthesis का जो अमल है, उसकी इतनी high efficiency है जो किसी और quantum mechanical, किसी और physical process में देखने में कम आती है, और वो quantum mechanically explain होती है. अब ये solid phenomenon है biology की realm से, जो quantum mechanical explanation जिनकी एक वाजिब है और वो इत्मीनान बख्श explanation मौजूद है. अब जहां तक रॉजर पेनरोज और इस तरह के दीगर नोबल लॉरिएट्स, सर आंखों पे उनकी सारी सोच और उनकी काविश और उनकी कॉन्ट्रीब्यूशंस, लेकिन जब उनकी वो भी थेरीज कंजेक्चर्स हैं. बिल्कुल माइक्रोट्यूब्यूल्स वाली जो थेरी है वो एक कंजेक्चर है. तो दरअसल कुछ क्वांटम मैकेनिक्स के अंदर मिस्ट्रीज हैं जिन्हें मिस्ट्रीज आमतौर पे समझा जाता है. ऑपरेशनल फिजिसिस्ट उनको मिस्ट्री नहीं समझता, वो उनको इस्तेमाल करता है. मसलन मेजरमेंट का पैराडॉक्स, कि अगर सेल्फ अवेयरनेस रॉजर पेनरोज करता है कि मेजरमेंट के पैराडॉक्स की वजह से है कि एक सुपरपोजिशन एग्जिस्ट करती है, जब आप वो कोलैप्स करती है, क्लासिकल डोमेन में आती है, तो वो अवेयरनेस कॉज करती है. अब ये देखने में बड़ी खूबसूरत एक एनालॉजी है, लेकिन इसको प्रूव करना, इसको डिसप्रूव करना, इसकी फॉल्सिफाइबिलिटी को उसको जांचना बहुत मुश्किल है. फिर न्यूरॉन्स की आपको पता है नर्व इंपल्सेस की खास स्पीड है जो कि बहुत छोटी है. स्पीड आप बेहतर जानते होंगे, हो सकता है वो 1 सेंटीमीटर, 1 सेकंड में चंद सेंटीमीटर या मिलीमीटर्स की एक्शन पोटेंशियल की कंडक्शन स्पीड हो, लेकिन कॉन्शियसनेस की स्पीड और उसकी जो टाइमिंग है वो इससे बहुत बाला है, बहुत तेज है. तो इंडिविजुअल एक्शन इंपल्सेस, तो वो स्पीड, तो ये क्या, अभी एक नया आर्टिकल पिछले हफ्ते छपा है जो कहता है कि इंटेंगलमेंट इसका कॉज है, कि फोटॉन्स के दरमियान इंटेंगलमेंट है. आपको पता है हर केमिकल रिएक्शन के अंदर प्रोटॉन ट्रांसफर होता है या इलेक्ट्रॉन ट्रांसफर होता है. बाज़ फोटोकेमिकल रिएक्शंस में फोटॉन्स भी एमिट होते हैं ट्रांजिटरी स्पीशीज के तौर पर, तो उनके दरमियान इंटेंगलमेंट इस हाई स्पीड को कॉज करती है. लेकिन बुनियादी तौर पर अभी तक कॉन्शियसनेस क्वांटम फिजिसिस्ट की भी पूरी गिरफ्त में नहीं है. आप जितने आर्टिकल्स देखें, एक कॉन्जेक्ट, उनके अंदर एक बड़ा एक फैसिनेशन है, एक मिस्ट्री है, और वो जो आर्टिकल्स हैं जवाब से ज्यादा सवाल पे मुंतज होते हैं. लेकिन इस पे यकीनी तौर पर हमें सिस्टम्स चाहिए जिन्हें हम टॉय मॉडल्स कहते हैं, छोटे सिस्टम्स चाहिए. स्निफिंग की खूबसूरती ये थी कि आप उसे रेप्लिकेट कर सकते हैं, आप क्वांटम बायोलॉजी के दीगर एक्सपेरिमेंट्स को रेप्लिकेट कर सकते हैं. प्रॉब्लम क्या है? प्रॉब्लम का लुबे लुबाब ये है कि क्वांटम मैकेनिक्स आमतौर पर गर्म दुनिया की साइंस है, मैं माजरत चाहता हूँ, ठंडी दुनिया की साइंस है और छोटी दुनिया की साइंस है. It deals with the microscopic, nanoscopic और atomic world, and it deals with the very cold world. क्योंकि डीकोहेरेंस नहीं होती जब आपका टेम्परेचर लो होता है. हमारे लिविंग ऑर्गेनिजम्स एक तो मैक्रोस्कोपिक हैं, बड़े हैं. हमारे जब कंप्यूटर काम करता है तो उसके अंदर भी इलेक्ट्रॉन्स हैं, वो क्वांटम मैकेनिकल एंटिटीज हैं. लेकिन जब बहुत बड़े तादाद में इलेक्ट्रॉन्स हो तो वो एक एवरेज बिहेवियर देता है. जो जिस दुनिया में हम रहते हैं, क्लासिकल वर्ल्ड इज एन एवरेज क्वांटम वर्ल्ड, and all the coherences they kind of average out and they disappear in the macroscopic world. तो quantum physics छोटी दुनिया की साइंस है. living organisms, human mind, human brain, ये बड़े macroscopic, emergent, large networks हैं, complex objects हैं. इसीलिए ये जो तत्बीक है ना, इसको मुताबिकत करना एक छोटी चीज को एक बड़ी चीज के साथ बहुत मुश्किल है. मेरे ख्याल में ये उसी तरह का ला यानहिल मसला अभी तक है जो क्वांटम ग्रेविटी है. ग्रेविटी जनरल रिलेटिविटी बड़ी चीज की साइंस और फिजिक्स है, क्वांटम छोटी की है. इसीलिए ब्लैक होल्स के इर्द गिर्द आपको ये कॉन्सोनेंट्स ढूंढना मुश्किल होता है. दूसरी चीज, हमारे जो बॉडी टेम्परेचर्स हैं 37 डिग्रीज सेल्सियस के करीब, इन स्टेट्स, इन लेवल्स पर बोल्ट्जमैन डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन हम जानते हैं. जो एनर्जी लेवल्स हैं वो उनके दरमियान स्पेसिंग है और हायर एनर्जी लेवल्स भी पॉपुलेट हो जाते हैं. तो ये क्लासिकल बिहेवियर आपको नजर आता है. तो क्वांटम फिनोमेनन देखने के लिए आपको बहुत छोटे टेम्परेचर्स पे जाना जाना पड़ता है। तो इसीलिए ये जो तत्बीक है, ये कॉन्ग्रुएंस ढूंढना मुश्किल है कॉन्शियसनेस में, ह्यूमन माइंड में और क्वांटम मैकेनिक्स में। तो माजरत, मेरी जो सोच है इस बारे में फिलहाल तो बड़ी यासंगेज है, इसमें मुझे
सर,
अभी
लेकिन
मैंने दिल की माफी ज़मीर आपको बता दिया।
सर, यही तो आप, दैट्स द होल पॉइंट ऑफ हैविंग यू ऑल हियर टुगेदर, कि हम सारे मतमाए नजर, मुख्तलिफ तरह के पॉइंट्स ऑफ व्यू जांच सकें कि हर बंदे का अपने पूल ऑफ नॉलेज, अपने इल्म के मुताबिक किस नतीजे पे पहुंच रहे हैं कि ये क्या हो सकता है। आपने बात की कि हम ऑल्फैक्शन से, हम विजन से बहुत सारे एक्सपेरिमेंट्स और ये रेप्लिकेट कर सकते हैं, और ये वही अप्रोच है जिसको हम बॉटम्स अप अप्रोच करते हैं, कि क्वांटम जो हम कॉन्शियसनेस के डिफरेंट कंपोनेंट्स को अलग-अलग करके उनको स्टडी करें, but it still does not solve the problem of what the whole is. The whole, according to what we understand, appears to be much bigger than the sum of its parts. और वो जो मच बिगर है वो कैसे है? डॉक्टर हुसैनी साहब का बीच में एक रेज्ड हैंड नजर आ रहा है। सर, यू वांट टू ऐड टू इट?
So the four things, and I'll be short. एक तो शेर है मिर्जा गालिब का, एक और इसी चीज के ऊपर, हस्ती के मत फरेब में आ जाइयो असद, आलम तमाम हल्का दाम ख्याल
है। क्या बात।
डॉक्टर अनवर ने अभी falsifiability की बात की। Karl Popper popularized this idea, and he co-authored a book with Sir John Eccles, who won the Nobel Prize for his work on synapses in 1963. They are the only mainstream philosophers and scientists who actually believe not just in dualism, but in trialism. So there is property dualism, where we say, okay, particles have physical, mathematical properties, and they are somewhat conscious too. And there is substance dualism, where people say, okay, there is a physical world, and then there is a spiritual world where consciousness lies. But they are trialists, so they believe in all three shades all the time. As far as olfaction is concerned, I think Chalmers, when he talks about qualia, basically, so I can see the color red, but red is the only reference point of red. So a camera can see a million shades of red, more than I can, but it cannot experience red. On the other hand, a person who is born where the brain doesn't have the capacity to see red, they can get a PhD in neuroscience and talk about all sorts of wavelengths and whatnot, but they can never experience red. That is what the problem is, and that is what qualia are. Of course, Daniel Dennett says that this is all nonsense, qualia doesn't exist, and that's where he goes. Thank you.
वंडरफुल जी। इसके साथ ही फिर हमारे पास एक और बहुत वंडरफुल शख्सियत मौजूद हैं, डॉक्टर जाहिद। डॉक्टर जाहिद, चूंकि अभी इतनी शेर व शायरी की बात हो रही है, सो डॉक्टर जाहिद का एक तारुफ तो ये है कि डॉक्टर जाहिद is a physicist, mashallah, and he is one of the those people जिनके साथ आप discuss करके you can understand the concepts, and he can actually convey his complex thoughts very easily. And probably that's the reason that has also led him to being a very celebrated and well-published poet, mashallah. So Dr. Zahid, physicist hain, and I'll just briefly introduce Dr. Zahid to you. Dr. Zahid Saab is an experienced researcher with a focus on nanomaterials and photoelectric catalysts for the application in energy environment. Currently working as a group leader at the Technical University in Munich, guiding a team of PhD researchers and multidisciplinary collaborators on a variety of different projects. Ongoing research projects include their MOFs and their derivative. MOF, sir, I couldn't understand what MOF is.
No, so porous materials, metal organic frameworks.
Right, metal organic framework, and their derivatives related to composite materials, additive manufacturing, 3D printing, vagara vagara. But Dr. Zahid Saab is is also well known in Urdu literary circles, and is an accomplished poet with several publications to his name. Zahid Saab आपसे जिस तरह प्रोफेसर अब्दुल शकूर के घर में बैठ के, डॉक्टर अब्दुल शकूर इज अ कॉमन फ्रेंड जी, ही इज अ साइकियाट्रिस्ट, और जब मेरे जैसा आदमी एक साइकियाट्रिस्ट और एक फिजिसिस्ट के साथ बैठ जाता है तो इस तरह की उल्टी सीधी बातें दोबारा निकल आती हैं, सर उठा लेती हैं। तो जिस तरह उनके घर में बैठ के डिस्कशंस होती थी सर, एक दफा द माइक इज इन फ्रंट, शमा आपके पास है, आप थोड़ी सी रोशनी डालें इस कॉन्शियसनेस को और उसकी एक्सप्लेनेशन को ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ क्वांटम फिजिक्स।
So thank you very much for this very elaborated introduction. So चूंकि मेरा ख्याल है ये आखिरी गुफ्तगू होगी इस सारे पैनल से, तो बहुत से एस्पेक्ट्स ऑलरेडी डिस्कस हो चुके हैं, और फ्रॉम फिजिक्स पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू काशिफ सभी अनवर साहब ने बहुत अच्छा एक्सप्लेन किया कि कहाँ पे जो कॉन्शियसनेस है, जो मटेरियल इंटरप्रिटेशन ऑफ ह्यूमन माइंड है उसको, या बायोलॉजिकल सिस्टम्स है उनको फिजिक्स की डोमेन में कैसे समझा जा सकता है, या बाकी लोगों ने जो फिजिक्स से सेहत के न्यूरोलॉजी या साइकोलॉजी के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में एक्सप्लेन किया. So without any repetition, I would just like to add my two pennies in this whole discussion, which already has very diverse points to discuss, and you can keep talking about this topic because it is kind of an open-ended debate, and consciousness cannot be very easily pinned down to one specific definition. So I think I would like to contribute the two further aspects कि अभी तक जो consciousness की डिस्कशन हो रही है, जिसको इधर वो फिजिक्स देख रहे हों या बायोलॉजिस्ट देख रहे हों, वो उसको एज अ ह्यूमन सेंट्रिक एक्टिविटी के तौर पे देखते हैं कि व्हाट इज विद इन द सेंसरी परसेप्शन, एंड व्हाट एवर कम्स इन द सेंसरी परसेप्शन विच इज टेंजिबल, विच इज काइंड ऑफ क्वांटिफाइबल, दैट माइट बी द कॉन्शियसनेस. वो मशीन लर्निंग के एल्गोरिथम्स हों, वो सेल्फ जनरेटेड ideas or through ChatGPT, wo large language models ke through generated autonomous texts. So whatever it is that, we are trying to find the material basis of consciousness. So यहाँ पे मुझे गालिब का एक शेर याद आता है. I think it's interesting कि गालिब ही आज की गुफ्तगू में सबसे relevant है, क्योंकि हमारे पास एक ऐसा philosophical poet है जो he already talked about all these things many years ago. जैसे उसके शेर है कि लताफत बेकसाफत जलवा पैदा कर नहीं सकती, लताफत बेकसाफत जलवा पैदा कर नहीं सकती, चमन जंगार है आईनाए बादे बहारी का. सो इट इज बेसिकली गालिब यही कह रहा है कि भाई जो नॉन फिजिकल एंटिटीज हैं, जो लताफत है, जो नॉन बीइंग है, नॉन एग्जिस्टिंग है, वो एग्जिस्टिंग है लेकिन नॉन टेंजिबल है, वो उसको कोई मटेरियल बेस चाहिए अपनी अपीयरेंस के लिए. ही नीड सम कसाफत, सम डेंसर मीडियम थ्रू व्हिच ही कैन मैनिफेस्ट हिज एग्जिस्टेंस. और दूसरे शेर में वो देता है कि चमन जंगार है आईना इबादे बहारी का. जैसे शीशे के पीछे कलर कोटिंग होती है जो ताकि रिफ्लेक्ट कर सके, तो चमन हवा की रिफ्लेक्शन है. तो एयर इज काइंड ऑफ अ नॉन टेंजिबल एक्सपीरियंस. तो कॉन्शियसनेस भी आई थिंक मुझे लगता है कि इट्स अ वेरी सिमिलर फिनोमिनन. तो जो हमारे एक्सपीरियंसेस हैं, जो इमोशंस हैं, जो सेंसरी एक्सपीरियंसेस हैं, जिनको हम फिजिकली टच करके क्वांटिफाई नहीं कर सकते, बट थ्रू the expressions of our material, we try to quantify them, we try to make sense out of that. So for me, again, as a physicist or a trained scientist, I am also not kind of a blind advocate of physics being able to explain this beyond material phenomenon. I very much agree with Sabi Anwar के जैसे इन्होंने कहा कि रॉजर पेनरोज वगैरह की जो थीरीज हैं, quantum entanglements and trying to understand everything down to the quantum phenomenon and superposition principles and all that. I think they are very rudimentary. They, of course, could be interesting if some kind of a experimental basis come at some point, maybe in 20, 30, 50 years, at some point, we are able to kind of simplify these experiments to kind of to the level where we can reproduce them in the lab. But at this existing state, I don't deny the possibility of coming up with the tools where we can go beyond five senses, because at some point, life itself was a mystery. And now we are able to comment on what life is, how life is formed, how human and even the living beings are emerging from non-living beings. If we can kind of create life from a single cell and we can kind of experiment that in the lab, maybe at some point we are able to comment in a limited capacity on how consciousness is defined. So the aspect I wanted to contribute in this discussion is, so the language itself, the language through which we communicate, is also define how we perceive the world from outside. अगर हम consciousness, एक ये लफ्ज जिसका original Latin है, we try to visualize this concept through this Latin word consciousness, जो आता है, जिसका genesis है the exchange and share of knowledge, and the exchange and share of knowledge, the consentia, means that only shared from one person to the next person, and those things may fall in the category of consciousness. But there are many experiences which are the psychedelic experiences, which are hallucinatory experiences. I have been very much interested in these hallucinations, in the psychedelic experiences when I was writing poetry in 2012, 13, experimenting with all kinds of things, trying to jump into my dreams and writing them in form of poetry to kind of how should I say that, to kind of personify the non-personifiable. So reading the works of these French surrealist poets and trying to understand how they kind of created this kind of a surrealist poetry, and the surrealism itself kind of go beyond this what physics try to define. So what is the original state of mind? The altered state when we are kind of on a next level of our consciousness, or this average, the everyday sensory experience. So I think it is much more complex phenomenon than that what quantum mechanics can offer. So the beauty of this is that it is an open-ended question. So if we talk about the consciousness and bring in intuition, which is kind of a beyond sensory experience, and I would say being kind of a more prone to interpreting the world for material point of view, not kind of in a very religious point of view, but I would say this intuition can also be pinned down to some material phenomenon, which is kind of, I would say, the metasensory experience. So your intuition will also be kind of bound to your material experiences. You cannot just kind of think of any random stuff and claim that it came from somewhere outside. So I think we can still bring all these meta-sensory experiences, intuition, or whatever you call it, alham, vajdan, and the sensory experience, which we can easily kind of numb it through anesthesia or these kind of medicinal inputs. So, and also the second thing that, as I would like to point out, that the consciousness as a human consciousness is one thing which we try to understand by creating also the machine learning models and trying to replicate human mind. But the consciousness of different level in the non-living beings, for example, being a material scientist, I am also very much interested to understand there are a type of materials called shape memory alloys. So where there are materials, you perturb their state of a certain material state, you change the external stimuli, and then they come back to the original state. So how does a material, a bunch of molecules or atoms organized in a certain crystalline or non-crystalline form, you give you kind of distort them, you change their shape, and then when you release them or give an external stimuli, they come back to the original state. How does a material know what is the original state of being, where the atoms were, what was the energy levels, what was the energy state? So if you kind of narrow it down, consciousness as kind of a material trackable set of actions, then a material can also have a kind of a limited consciousness. It is not a property of neurons. It could be beyond neurons. So these are the aspects which I think we should keep discussing, we should keep talking, and maybe can have a more liberal definition of consciousness than just a human-centric definition of consciousness. So that's all.
Thank you very much, Dr. Syed. आपने तो जिसे कहते हैं ना वो total perspective ही change कर दिया consciousness का. ये डॉक्टर हमारे जो न्यूरोलॉजिस्ट हैं, न्यूरोफिजिशियंस हैं, और जो साइकियाट्रिस्ट हजरात हैं, उनके लिए तो कॉन्शियसनेस का पर्सपेक्टिव ही आपने चेंज कर दिया है. और ये वो आपने डेविड चामर्स वाली बात की कि नॉन बायोलॉजिकल एंटिटीज की कॉन्शियसनेस के भी तो कोई पर्सपेक्टिव हो सकता है. सो you're absolutely right. डॉक्टर आगा अली रजा साहब ने भी यही कहा था कि पर्सपेक्टिव डिफरेंट हो सकते हैं. हम अगर इस कॉन्शियसनेस के अलावा किसी कॉन्शियसनेस की बात करें तो मे बी द मशीन्स कैन इवन गेट देयर, और वी डोंट नो. There may be multiple pathways leading to the same destination, and we don't even know whether it's the same destination or not. Before we go on to take questions, जो कि बहुत ज्यादा हो गए हैं अभी हमारे पास लिस्ट में, जी आगा साहब पहले आप कुछ कहना चाह रहे थे सर.
Gee, thank you so much. I just want to add one thing on top of this, because this has been amazing listening to my colleagues regarding the capability of AI and its ability to have consciousness or portray consciousness. Dr. Hussaini ने एक बड़ी अच्छी बात की थी कि I'm only aware of my own consciousness. That's the only thing I'm certain about. When I am interacting with another conscious being, now अब उसकी consciousness को मैं किस तरह से evaluate करूंगा, किस तरह test करूंगा, that question becomes really, really important when we're dealing with something which is non-human like AI, and very soon this question will become very pertinent. जब अभी तो हम मिलकर ये कह रहे हैं कि आपका ChatGPT conscious नहीं है, जब हम ये कह रहे होंगे कि अब वो कह रहा है कि मैं कॉन्शियस हूं और ऐसी बातें भी कर रहा है जो कि कॉन्शियस चीजें करती हैं, तो तब मेरे पास वो टेस्ट क्या होगा जिससे मैं इसको सो द ट्यूरिंग टेस्ट ऑफ कॉन्शियसनेस. और आई नो कि देयर हैव बीन मेनी थिंग्स व्हिच हैव बीन प्रपोज्ड अलोंग दिस लाइन. देयर इज दैट ऑप्टिकल इल्यूजन टेस्ट कि यू शो एन ऑप्टिकल इल्यूजन टू अ बीइंग, एंड द बीइंग इफ इट एक्सपीरियंसेस द इल्यूजन, then that may mean that it's introspecting whatever it's getting through its senses, and now it's saying कि okay, मुझे तो moving triangle नजर आ रहा है या moving rectangle या dots नजर आ रहे हैं जो कि सचमुच में exist नहीं करते. But we need that consciousness test at some point to validate and evaluate whether someone claiming to be conscious is indeed conscious or not.
So that leads us to a very, very interesting aspect जो अभी recently मेरे दिमाग में आई थी कि Alan Turing designed a test to determine whether a machine was conscious or not. लेकिन अब machines हमारे से पूछती हैं prove that you're a human. वो जो CAPTCHA test है, when you're logging into a website, और वो आपसे पहले confirm करने के लिए वो पूछती है कि पहले साबित करो भाई कि तुम इंसान हो या तुम भी कोई machine हो. So now the machines are asking us to prove whether we are human or not. Yes, Dr. Umar, you have your hand raised.
I'm just fascinated to interdisciplinary cross-pollination of ideas, and I mean, this can go really long, but I just wanted to validate kind of the different disciplines. So, Dr. Hussaini, I think later on would love to have conversation about the concept of noesis and noema, right? In philosophy, and how do we have an objective sense appreciation of knowledge versus the subjective experience of that and stuff. Like from a biological and physical point of view, we know in biological research that altered brain states with psychedelics would default mode network जो है, even after that decoherence of that network gets reorganized, there's a sustained level of this cosmic consciousness, this spiritual awareness. हमारी जो lens of appreciation of things beyond our own self, that's a sustained phenomenon that is objectively measurable for up to weeks after that. So people who are having surreal trips, I mean, they will explain, even people who are agnostic, they will say that this experience was not a drug high, but an experience that was one of my top 5 experiences in life. Almost some people described it as the experience of having a child or birthing a child and stuff, right? So absolutely, I think what is of hope from today's conversation is that there definitely are connections between all these disciplines. We're just not there yet, but we need to continue those conversations. And I think the more cross-pollination we'll have like this, the more we'll have those kind of eureka aha moments and stuff. So that was just kind of a observation.
Thank you very much, Umar, for putting words to my feelings right now. This is exactly how I feel, and I'm very excited and I'm very grateful कि ये आप सब लोगों ने अपने ideas का इज़हार किया. Sir, Dr. Ather, you have been a very... Sure, जी, Dr.
बहुत जल्दी से, I know कि अथर बहुत patiently wait कर रहे हैं to के समेटे. So I was just there are few quick points. एक तो ये कि हम जो test for consciousness की बात हुई, तो we are actually developing a test for consciousness. तो ये पेपर मैंने एक लिंक किया है. So there's a framework that we are developing. जिसपे सिर्फ एक टेस्ट फॉर कॉन्शियसनेस नहीं, but it is a battery of consciousness. So it's not just कि आप एक टेस्ट हो जिस तरह ट्यूरिंग टेस्ट आपका, but because consciousness is considered a multi-dimensional thing, so there are multiple tests that you can actually, and the important thing bit here is that it's not that we don't have any test for consciousness. There are multiple tests which are already there. उनमें से कुछ एक बहुत मशहूर कमांड फॉलोइंग का है, जिसमें एक एक्सपेरिमेंट था कि जिसमें एक खातून थी जो कि she had a disorder of consciousness, वो vegetative statement where she's not, she wasn't conscious. तो उनको बात किया, उनको MRI machine में डाल के उनको कहा गया, you imagine कि you are in your home or you are going from one place to another, and then people say कि उन्होंने देखा कि जी certain parts of the brain जो थे, they had signal which were actually same, they were also there in the control. So you can, so इसी तरह और बहुत सारे टेस्ट मौजूद हैं जो पेपर मैंने आपको अभी लिंक किया है. We have all the papers, all the tests जो हैं आप, how you can, so उसकी भी validation, the main जो चीज़ है उसमें, how do you test these, how do you validate these tests as well. फिर आपने एक बहुत quickly, everyone is talking about Dave Chalmers' heart problem of consciousness. So we actually in the neuroscience of consciousness or science of consciousness circle, we talk about the real problem of consciousness. It has become a kind of thing everyone talks about heart problem. The real problem is to understand what are the neural bases of conscious experiences. So if you go, and I would really encourage there's a annual conference, it's को कहते हैं Association of Scientific Study of Consciousness, ASSC. It happens every year. They say it was in Tokyo, a year before it was in New York. I was there. Dave Chalmers and Christoph Koch, they had a very, एक बहुत ही बड़ा event हुआ था, which was highly covered by, because it was the 25 years of their bet, जिसमें Christoph Koch, जो इसके पीछे काफी context, I don't want to go into that. But that conference, if you go to, the interesting thing, बड़ी वहाँ पे आप जाएंगे उस conference में, तो वहाँ पे आप ये समझें कि जी हर कोई consciousness पे बात कर रहा है. वहाँ पे जो talks हैं consciousness पे हैं, पोस्टर्स लगे हैं, 300-400-500 लोग होते हैं उस कॉन्फ्रेंस में. आप जाएंगे तो वहाँ पे ऐसा कुछ भी नहीं होता. People are actually talking about different aspects of things, like they are talking about visual experiences, visual consciousness, perception, metacognition. So the problem is कि जो real problem की जो मैं बात कर रहा हूँ, और I think someone said कि Syed, I think आपने कहा कि 200 years ago people were talking, it was mystery कि life, what is life, right? Now with so much advances in biology, the whole problem melted away. Nobody talks about what is life, how you define it. We know what is life. It actually doesn't need to be seen in a way something mysterious. Similarly, consciousness is not something which is in probably in 100 years, maybe 50 years or more or less. If we understand the different aspects of consciousness, ये हमारे perceptual sensory aspects हैं, इसके visual हैं, auditory consciousness, ये सारी चीजें हैं. Once we know, we understand the neural correlates of them, the whole problem will melt it away. So people are actually working on real problem of consciousness, which is to understand what are the neural correlate of the consciousness. And for that, people have developed these. There are many different tests that people have developed, and they actually tap into a certain aspect of consciousness. And when you combine these tests, then you can actually have a sort of a tests which are probably could be useful. खास तौर पर हम इस पेपर में we are talking about कि जी consciousness तो है, but in special cases, for example in fetuses, right? वो fetus consciousness जो है, it is a huge, actually the whole US election there's a whole debate about abortion and all that, right? So अगर हम ये कहते हैं, this is so contentious issues कि हम कहते हैं जी fetus conscious है, it has huge ethical reasoning, सारा कुछ उसमें बनता है. Then infant consciousness, disorders of consciousness. अब AI बहुत बड़ी बहस चल रही है. So we have quite a few things in that paper. People have been thinking about it. This paper is the outcome of a couple of years of lots of meetings with lots of people, and we have come up with something. It's led by a philosopher. So not to Hussaini Saab, and there is lots happening in this area, and lots we actually know about this as well. So that's where I stop, and I think we should.
Sir, thank you very much for your contribution. मैं सिर्फ ये कहना चाह रहा था कि today's meeting was just an introduction, जिसमें हर बंदे ने अपना perspective of consciousness दिया है, and we are really short in time के हमारे पास अब वो time नहीं रहा जो मैं foresee कर रहा था that we'll have an open-ended discussion. But I'll very much like Dr. Ather to finally sum up everything that we've all said and put some sense into our perspective. Sir, over to you.
जी यार, ये तो आपने ना सबसे मुश्किल काम मेरे हवाले कर दिया. It's like a poison chalice, right? हाँ. This is to sum it up. I mean, जहाँ पे लोग मुत्तफिक ही नहीं है तो वहाँ sum it up कैसे कर सकते हैं? But I was very impressed by this group of people, honestly. I did not know most of you guys. I knew Razi and I knew Sabi. So, मैंने बल्कि रजा से कहा भी था कि जो है ये दो तो मैं जानता हूँ, बाकी लोग जो हैं, are they gonna fit? And it's just amazing कि आप लोगों की knowledge, mashallah, and understanding is just was just overwhelming. So what I'm gonna instead of summing it up, I will just say things which may actually contradict few people, which may support some people. And I think we don't really understand consciousness. We all of us agree upon that one. The problem is कि जो कि आपके जाहिद भी कह रहे थे. और by the way, जो issue है अपना psychedelic इसका और उसका, that is all you can be explained by Bayesian brain. That is not an issue from that perspective. And जहाँ तक इल्हाम की बात है, या इल्हाम का लफ्ज़ इस्तेमाल नहीं करूँगा मैं, जहाँ तक बात है gut feeling की उसकी वगैरह, तो again that can be explained by your perception and what gets to the level of consciousness वगैरह वगैरह, जो कि आपकी the storyteller Malcolm Gladwell ने भी अपनी किताब में लिखा हुआ ब्लिंक में. The problem is कि और आप लोगों ने ये बात बिल्कुल सही की कि we should step away from this thing, what psyche could never explain life. Though during the Renaissance, scientists like Lavoisier and Priestley, they said, okay, let's look at the basics, oxygen, carbon, how the life is formed, and do it scientifically. We can't, if we go into this mysticism, it's not going to work. Karen Armstrong कहती है ना कि mythos and logos का अलग रखो. Mythos is beauty. आप बहुत खूबसूरत चीजें हैं और सब कुछ है, लेकिन if you try to put mythos and logos together, you will get nowhere. So let's focus on the logos. Otherwise, आप can मुनाजरा करते रहें आप जो बगदाद में होते थे, and did not come to any conclusion कि कुरान ये मखलूक है कि कुरान जो है किताब है, कि हुज़ूर सल्लम के जो है कपड़ों का साया होता था कि नहीं होता था. I mean, you can get into this. Is there a God or is there no God? There's no proof of that, right? So let's go into things that has this logos basis, and we can work on that one. So if I go into this thing, then I look at the dualism and all that thing, and I think that सबसे ज़्यादा बदमाशी जो की थी ना वो उसने की थी आपके डेकार्ट ने. I mean, come on, mind को अलग कर दिया brain से. Mind is just a function of brain, right? So the dualistic approach has to be pushed back, and then don't be afraid to say that call a spade a spade. Roger Penrose is all talking about pseudoscience. And just because somebody got a Nobel Prize doesn't mean that person knows everything. I have examples in Pakistan. There's a very well-known scientist who talks about memory based on hydrogen bonding. I have, a very well-known scientist जिसकी पूरे पाकिस्तान इज्जत करता है, who talks about कि हाँ पानी से गाड़ी चल सकती है. And the scientist who talked about the hydrogen bonding memory, he was the one actually who came right on this one and said that's nonsense, thermodynamic principle का वो नहीं कर सकते. So you know, so let's not just because कि somebody comes up and macrotubules, come on यार, macrotubules से आप तो फिर तो सारे plant cell में macrotubules हैं, मेरे kidney cell में macrotubules हैं. How are you putting it together? Just because इसमें सभी I would need to know that person जो जिसने आपको वो call दिया था कि you know people don't understand quantum physics and people don't understand consciousness, and just because they don't understand these two things, they are together. I will quote that somewhere. And that's exactly what it is. We try to put things into complex or you know, we try to impress people कि यार ये फला है, and that's what हमारे हजरत पेनरोज भी यही कर रहे हैं in terms of that. And then going into mysticism कि ये पत्थर में भी consciousness है, तो subatomic barons में भी consciousness होगी, तो gluons में भी consciousness होगी, तो फिर you know leptons में भी consciousness होगी, तो फिर photons क्यों रह जाए, उसमें भी consciousness. I mean, you know, can you prove that nonsense? No, you cannot. Let's go back where we can look at things and do them experimentally. So my understanding of consciousness is that it is all nervous system based. Okay, that is something that we can bring in our grips. कि हाँ, nervous system based is consciousness. अब उसमें जो है, one thing that really helped me understand consciousness was Tulving came up with this noetic and anoetic and autonoetic consciousness, right? He actually was talking about more of memory. But then there's an anoetic consciousness. So where is the consciousness? What is consciousness? We are looking at a big elephant. हर कोई छू रहा है, कोई दुम छू रहा है, कोई उसके कान छू रहा है, कोई उसकी टांग छू रहा है, और हर कोई अपनी consciousness बता रहा है. And by the way, toothbrush theory आपकी अच्छी है अदील, लेकिन there are some people who come up with not toothbrushes but they're जूते का brush लेकर आ जाते हैं, and you know we need to discard those ones completely, right? So we need to be very brutal about those. So इसमें जो है ना, जो consciousness का, what is consciousness, we have to figure that out, and that helped me understand a lot. There are two things that helped me understand a lot. I was going to Gilgit, मैं ट्रैवल कर रहा था, ऐसी गाड़ी में बैठा हुआ था, एकदम से मुझे ये दो चीजें मेरे ध्यान में आई. I had a surgery and I had no consciousness at that point. And then I thought, where was my consciousness when I was 6 months old, when I was, 5 years old, when I was 1 year old? So then, it suddenly, the understanding of consciousness sort of, I could put my arms and put my brain around it. And that's why it's important to understand what is consciousness, what we can define consciousness, right? Mystic इसमें जाने की जरूरत नहीं है. तो anoetic consciousness is, without knowledge. A cockroach responds to a stimulus, it's a conscious, right? It responds to it. That's anoetic consciousness. Without knowledge, it's just like reflexive system. जहाँ तक आती बात एजेंसी की, a rat would know कि मैं liver दबाऊंगा तो मुझे खाना मिलेगा, ज़्यादा liver दबाऊंगा तो ये होगा. So that's a noetic consciousness. And then comes autonoetic consciousness, where we talk about ourself, we understand ourself, right? When we talk about that, that's where the heart problem starts to come up. Now that is again all algorithm based. There's no question about it. And I think if we understand those algorithms, we will be able to understand your feelings. I mean, the nucleus accumbens, the amygdala, all the brainstem centers. If you understand the feelings that comes in with all these experiences, इसमें qualia भी आ जाएगा. That will help you understand कि the heart problem is या तो उसको problem बना दें बेला वजह में ही. It is really not a heart problem. It's part of a real problem जो कि आप लोग define कर रहे थे. And it's all explainable if you understand the neuronal circuitry in the brain. So that I don't think is really so much of an issue if you understand it from that perspective. तो मेरे ख्याल में ना जो है this is something that is a journey, a personal journey to understand consciousness. I can't convince all of you guys. यहाँ पे पहले 100 के करीब लोग थे, अब 67 रह गए हैं, 100 से ऊपर चले गए थे, क्योंकि यार क्या बकवास हो रही है. They will fall back into mysticism, right? They will fall back, यानी हवा मुझे कुछ कह रही है और मेरी तकदीर भी है ये, और जो पत्थर में भी कॉन्शियसनेस है. I can't argue with those people. और बाकी जो आधे, उसमें सिर्फ आधे जो हैं, they will be like confused. So very few people will really follow this thing. And I think it's a personal journey to understand consciousness. It's just that like-minded people have to come together. So, those people who think like me, I'm going to just join hands with them and discuss more things. I can't change the mind of a person who believes in के जो जलजला आता है या जो planet Earth है, it is a flat. I have a
बट अब टाइम नहीं है
good
और मेरा बहुत गंद है
अच्छा
My apologies, sir.
So there was a gentleman, doctor, यहाँ पे मैं ड्राइंग रूम में बैठ के, लाइब्रेरी में बैठ के, he argued with me कि planet Earth is flat. And he gave all the arguments. So I could not convince him. Eventually, 4-5 साल बाद he got convinced for some reason. So I can't convince those people who talk about flat Earth and, you know, there's a society behind it. And so in a similar way, I can't argue with people who say a rock has a consciousness. So it's a personal journey. I enjoyed thoroughly understanding consciousness the way I understand it. And I would love to talk about it on a scientific basis, on a logic basis, in the realm of logos. I will not go into mythos. And, you know, all these things are worth discussing and worth explaining. So, but it has been a wonderful experience, despite the fact that I'm dismissing the mythos and all that part, but listening to that, just like शेर को सुनने में बड़ा मजा आता है, तो mythos सुनने में मजा आता है. So it has been a wonderful experience, and thanks to, you know, salute to Raza साहब. Raza, by the way, मैं चेयर नहीं हूँ आजकल, सर जी को बार-बार आ जाता है. I've stepped down from that. So yeah, so salute to you, Raza, कि आपने जो है, you know, I mean, I wish I had known all these people, you know, 10 years ago. तो मैं शायद ज़्यादा ज़हीन होता अभी. It's just a wonderful group of people, and I'm sure you have a whole big of people. इनका जो क्या है वो consciousness Wampel का जो group है, उसमें तो 50 लोग और भी हैं. And you know, each one of them have their own ideas and theories. So it's a wonderful thing, definitely. बहुत शुक्रिया.
Thank you very much for your wonderful dismissals as well as wonderful understanding and giving us the perspective जो आप consciousness का लेते हैं. But then again, there is, respected as you are, there is all the possibility of people from all the perspectives coming up with different explanations according to their disciplines. And the whole purpose of bringing them all together was not to come up with a consensus, जो कि ऐसी चीज के लिए probably possible ही नहीं है, but the purpose was to get exposed to each other's perspectives and maybe acquire some understanding of an elusive phenomena like consciousness. एक चीज में मैं आपसे बड़ा hard disagreement करता हूँ. It is not all that simple. It is not all physical. ये, I mean, dualists भी हैं, आप जैसे scientists भी हैं. But in my personal experience, sir, not personal experience, to my knowledge, we are missing the point here. The consciousness, uske components can very well be described. Dr. Sabi ने बहुत अच्छा describe किया. Olfaction को भी, even at the molecular level, हम vision को भी describe कर सकते हैं. There are, you know, photons that hit a certain, you know, electron, और वहाँ से वो molecular change होता है, और molecular change membrane potential को change करता है, और membrane potential एक nerve impulse fire करता है, and then the nerve impulse goes back after, you know, convoluting through the visual circuit, and then ends up in the visual cortex, and then we see. अब we, who sees this? Who's there? अब ये आप इसको mystic कह लें, इसको आप noetic वो क्या कह लें. This is an actual problem. This is a question why my phone camera has all those reactions, has all those chemical reactions, photon को sensitive भी है, उसका sensor वो सारा कुछ कर भी रहा है, but the camera can produce a picture, can produce an output, but can't perceive the image the way I can. I can't. वो एक philosophy में बड़ी अच्छी example है, sir, that if a tree falls in a forest and there's nobody there to hear that tree falling, has the tree really made a sound? That's a very valid question. People think this is, you know, nonsense. Lekin, what is sound? Sound is a perception that somebody has when those air molecules, जो waves of compression and rarefaction से हमारे eardrum पे आ रहे हैं, वो hit करते हैं. तो even वो hit करना, वो neural impulse भी sound नहीं है. The sound is a perception that I have. And if there is nobody to perceive it, like if there's a deaf person there, the same waves, the same compression rarefaction molecules will hit on that person. It will be produced by a falling tree, but the sound is not there because the person is not perceiving it. ये श्रोडिंगर्स कैट वाला dilemma आ जाता है इसके अंदर बहुत सारी चीजें. लेकिन my point is conscious perception और एक machine perception में I believe there's a very big difference. एक चीज हमारी understanding में बड़ी clearly आ सकती है if we understand that there are different ways to explaining the same phenomena. We may subscribe to one way, but there is another group of people who subscribe to another way of understanding. हमारे से पहले बहुत सारी इस तरह की races गुजरी हैं who have, you know, Egyptians had their own you know, set of principles. Dr. Zahid ने कुछ share किया है. I'm sorry, I've missed that. So जो हमारे Peruvian Incas थे, उनकी कोई और understanding थी, but just because we don't subscribe to that understanding doesn't mean that they definitely are wrong. They may be wrong, yes, I'm saying that, but there is another possibility that they were right in their own sense. It's just that we don't understand the way. So acupuncture is one example, sir.
Nasir, that's what I'm saying. Okay, it's a personal journey.
It's a personal journey. Absolutely.
It's a personal journey,
Absolutely.
right? That's what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely,
I realized when I was arguing with that guy with the flat earth theory, I realized it's a personal journey. This is the way he wants to look at the earth. He says it's flat. And there's a society, a flat earth society, right? So I'm not going to argue with that. It's a personal journey. This is how I look at consciousness. Each one of you looks at consciousness in a certain way. And there's no way that we want to convince each other, right?
True.
There's no need to do that. It's our own personal journey.
True.
But then mythos or logos ko na milaya to behtar hai. That is something more universal. Then we should keep the mythos and logos separate.
Okay, sir, time to hum logon ne 2 घंटे पूरे ले लिए हैं, and I believe there are a bunch of questions. I don't know whether we should take them or not. I know there are.
मेरे ख्याल में एक काम करें, Nasir. We can have a sort of a a regular consciousness discussion.
Yes, sir.
That we can have. I mean, this is a wonderful group of people. अगर आप चाहें तो maybe quarterly or 6 monthly, just get together over here. People can join and we can discuss things.
I was seriously considering that, sir.
Right. That would be a good thing.
So for all the audience जो यहाँ पे हैं, and for all the people who have thrown in their questions, they're all recorded with us. Thank you very much. I think today was just an introductory session to this, I will say again, a fascinating and complex field. And today we'll probably have to let it go at that. Or we will take your questions, we will record your questions, and I take it upon myself to make sure that these questions are at some point replied to by, if not all, by most of us or whoever is available. So we will try to reply to those questions. For the time being, I'm going to call it a day. Thank you very much, everybody. I understand you're all very busy people, और हमने पहले ही आपका बहुत सारा टाइम सिर्फ 5-5 मिनट की एक्सप्रेशन अपने perspective को बताने में ले लिया है. मेरा expectation थी that we will have an interactive discussion, जिसके लिए probably इस दफा टाइम नहीं है, but we will have it next time. And
ये जो चैट है, रजा, जो चैट है, इसको आप अभी सेव कर लीजिए, क्योंकि जब ये बंद करेंगे ना चैट सारी
जी सर, we'll doing that.
ये मेरे ख्याल में ये वो शमूज, इसको आप सेव कर लीजिए बेटा chat ko, so that we can look at the chat. Yeah.
Right. So other than very big thank you to all the people. मैं बहुत ज़्यादा आपका personally मशकूर हूँ, ममनून हूँ. डॉक्टर हुसैनी, डॉक्टर तकी साहब, आगा साहब, डॉक्टर अत्थर, सभी साहब, और अदील का तो मैं बहुत ही जिसे कहना चाहिए ना, highly extremely grateful. वहां पे सर रात का 1 बजा हुआ है, एंड मेरे लिए ये बड़ा मुश्किल था टाइम सारों को कोऑर्डिनेट करने का, विद जाहिद फ्रॉम जर्मनी एंड पीपल, उमर फ्रॉम यूएस एंड डॉक्टर अदील फ्रॉम ऑस्ट्रेलिया. I'm very grateful to Adil जिन्होंने agree ultimately कर लिया कि यार मेरे लिए रात ही
Yeah.
ठीक है. If you're
11
okay.
o'clock is perfectly fine. बच्चे सो
I'm
रहे
so
हैं, I
great.
can do. Work
I am
work
so
is
great.
fine.
Tahajjud पढ़ के सोएंगे. And we are very grateful to you, Nasir, for
Thank
putting
you
it
very
all
much.
together. We
Thank
are
you
very
very
grateful
much.
to you.
Thank
ये
you very much.
ये पहले कभी ऐसा नहीं हुआ पाकिस्तान में, और you know, you are the pioneer in starting this kind of discussion.
Sir, following your footsteps. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. We'll call it a day. Allah
Thank
Hafiz.
you.